Hello, beautiful people. My name is Kristen. Thank you for stopping by my channel. Enter the book. Today I have my top books of 2023. So I always have a little debate on how am I going to do nonfiction versus classics versus fiction. But what I think I've decided, because I have a really hard time comparing nonfiction to fiction. So out of the 28 nonfiction, there were two that really stood out to me. There were several 5-star reads this year, but two kept coming back up as books that I continue to think about and to really recommend to a lot of people throughout the year. So I'm just going to give you those two nonfiction top books, kind of not really in order, and you can just kind of put them into place if you want. But that is Braiding Sweetgrass, and the other one is on Juneteenth. So let me just share a little bit about these to see if there are books that you would be interested in reading. So Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This, I like to kind of read the tagline because I really think it does a great job of describing the book. It says, indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants, which on the surface, that may sound kind of textbooky and dry, but let me just read like the first paragraph of one chapter to give you a feel for the beauty of this. It's the three sisters. It should be them who tells the story. Corn leaves rustle with a signature sound, a papery conversation with each other and the breeze. On a hot day in July, when the corn can grow 6 inches in a single day, there is a squeak of internodes expanding, stretching the stem towards the light. Leaves escape their sheaves with a drawn-out creak, and sometimes, when all is still, you can hear the sudden pop or rupture pith, when water-filled cells become too large and turgid for the confines of the stem. These are the sounds of being, but they are not the voice. Is just lovely, poetic. You actually learn so much about the landscape, about these Native American spirituality, as well as their values and teaching about nature. And it really kind of challenges you to even rethink some of your own notions about nature and nature's relationship back to man. So totally outstanding nonfiction. And then on Juneteenth, this is Annette Gordon Reed. This is a kind of history account of the Texas Galveston Declaration of the Freedom of the Slaves, and this woman's memoir of growing up a Black woman in Texas and how did she learn about Texas history, and then as she got older and learned more details, how did that affect her perspective. And so I think that this book it's pretty short. I would love to see this actually taught and discussed in schools about how, I think this fits really well into that discussion in a very open, non-partisan way of how do we talk about the fullness of history, even some of the more difficult parts, and then how do we then apply that to current stories and narratives and what is right and what we want to choose for ourselves in, today. So I love this. I felt like I learned a lot more, fullness to story and to history, and also got a fun look into Annette's upbringing in Texas, and also just made me again really ponder and think. And so I have highly recommended this to multiple people throughout the year. So those two books really stood out to me. Now I'm going to kind of do a top 10 fiction / the classics are in here. And these are based on just my own personal reading. These, of course, did not all come out in 2023, and I didn't, read every single book in the universe in 2023, but of the books that I read, these are my top 10. So number 10, I'm giving to Amy Harmon, What the Wind Knows. This was a great read that was a story of a woman who is honoring her grandfather's passing by taking his ashes back to Ireland, back to the family roots, and she is mystically swept into the past, and then meeting past ancestors and kind of discovering her roots. And I had been recommended to read this author for a long time, and I finally did it, and I am really pleased to discover her and to read more in the future, because this was one of my top books. Now at number 9, I'm cheating just ever so slightly, but this is my Brandon Sanderson answer. His top 2 that I read this year are both standalones. They're both excellent places to start if you just want to get a feel for if he is an author for you. And that is one of the top books of the year that did come out in 2023, Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is a story of a young girl who goes on a quest to kind of, save the world and save her love and just set things straight in a magical world where the sea is nothing but plant spores and very dangerous. And it's just a lot of fun. It kind of has that Guardians of the Galaxy feel to me, as well as he was inspired by Princess Bride. Then this one, Elantris, which I had buddy read with Gemma at Gemma Books, and turned out to be one of my very favorite books that I read. It is a standalone, although he will someday write a sequel to this. It is kind of more his normal telling pace of a magical world that has a mysterious city with mysterious properties and mysterious magic, and you are trying to figure out the hierarchy of the royalty and the magic systems and the battling for the property, and how are we going to restore and get the darkness and the sludge and restore the light and the healing. And so there's a lot of symbolism. There's, in traditional Brandon Sanderson style, a bunch of 1-2 punches at the end where things come together, where you were trying to figure out what the heck was going on all along. So I really love that about his writing style, and highly, highly recommend this one as a great one to understand if you're going to do well with his writing and have a fun adventure. Number 8, Dune by Frank Herbert. So I did read the first 6 and then, or started reading up through book 6 in the Dune series. And I got a little bogged down within the whole journey. But I have to go back and say, this first Dune book, even though it's big and chunky and it intimidated me for many years, and I finally picked it up in 2023, was reading it with my good friend Michelle at Books Cause Insomnia. This world is amazing. I loved this character, Paul, who kind of takes on this almost mythical messiah kind of role. There is a lot of talk and implications for ecology, the good of the planet. How do other species relate back to the humans, and what is the ethical line of drawing, for human needs versus planetary needs? There is a lot of political wars and strife. There is a lot of great world building with the interest of the fish and the worms and the sand and this beautiful kind of raw, deserty kind of planet. So just a brilliant, brilliant read. Just turned out to be one of my favorites. Number 7, I am surprisingly going to give to Stephen King, because if you know me, you know I'm not really a horror girl, but 11/23/63, which I ended up buddy reading with Gloria Z. Thompson for my Mammoth, I believe, for the year. When I read it, it was like 4.5 stars, but over time, I keep on thinking about this story. I keep on just really appreciating the brilliance of Stephen King. I don't really intend to read more of Stephen King necessarily, but I find that this story, which was like a time portal where he is trying to ethically change history for the better and trying to stop the assassination of the president, which seems like a very worthy thing, but it's kind of that butterfly creepy effect. And it does have some violence and some kind of grotesque parts, but it was part of the story. Like, it was a legit telling of what was going on and necessary for that part of the story. So this was worthy. Number 6, I'm going to give to a recent read, William Kent Kruger's This Tender Land. I loved following Odie's story, trying to struggle at a boys' home, being an orphan, but having some, ties to brothers and to other students that he's trying to get along with, but there's some misuse of power. There's an altercation where he really can't stay there anymore. He has to leave, kind of run for his life. And so some other students go with him, and they journey trying to get back to some related relatives to try to build a new life. And it's a beautiful story of just the rawness of the land, of the people, of society back in the 30s, and also just a journey of found family. And what does it mean to have a home? What does it mean to have a family? Number 5, I can't find my copy at the moment, but I definitely keep on being visited by a little life. And this book was just a difficult read. Nobody, tells you, this is usually a suggestion for Misery May, right? It is heartbreaking. It is a beautiful, in-depth, character building, slow-paced, found friends, trying to get through difficulties of life and deal with difficult life issues. And it just kind of pulls you in and then rips your heart out. You do need to be in the mood for that. You do need to be ready to be on a long, slow, emotional kind of paced book. But if you are, I think it was worthy. I think it's a beautifully told story. Number 4, I'm going to give to Nella Larsen's Passing, a very small classic book. It's basically the story of a couple of women who are friends. They are both light-skinned but have black heritage, and this is a time where even one drop of black blood deems you unacceptable in society. One woman particularly tries to pass herself off permanently as a white woman, and then one does so occasionally at her convenience when she needs to, but predominantly chooses to be, in the black culture. And so they keep on crossing paths. They keep on pondering their friendships. What does it mean to be part of the other society? Just us as a reader get to struggle through the ethics of the things going on and how people are treated, and just a very intriguing little plot drama trying to figure things out and sort things out, and that tension of, are they going to be discovered and what happens if they are? So another one of those books. Oh, and this one I read with Nikki at Red Dot Reads. So a lot of my books that were in the tops ended up being buddy reads, so maybe there's something to that for me. Number 3 was a book that I listened to on audio, classic free, and that was Flowers for Algernon. Now, maybe the power of listening to this one was part of what made it great, but this is a story of a boy who is born mentally challenged and undergoes some surgery procedures to make him smart, and then his kind of diary documentary of this experience, and this fascination that just haunts me about how do we deal with those who are deemed mentally challenged. How do we value different people, and how do we value intelligence? How do we react when you come up with a situation where you yourself don't feel smart or feel like you are fully equipped to deal with something? This was just a fascinating short little classic that I think is brilliant and just powerfully written. Just highly recommend. Number 2 in my top books is A Radical Act of Free Magic by H.G. Parry. So this is actually the conclusion of a duology that starts a declaration of the rights of magicians. This is what I think they're calling a magical realism fiction story, where basically it's well-researched historical fiction, but then it's saying that a lot of these historical characters actually had magic. They had properties that made them a necromancer, or have abilities to influence people through telepathy, or werewolf properties that allowed them kind of superhuman strength or experiences. And it also is dealing with kind of a mystery dark magic of kind of traveling in other people's heads or bodies kind of thing, that is like a vampire kind of situation. And it also is dealing a lot about the English and French revolutions, the slave trade, talking about the powers in Parliament, and this one deals a lot with Napoleon. So I learned quite a bit more about history. I would even get intrigued and stop and Google search and read the Wikipedia version of what was going on, just to make it that much more rich. But I found this book really did go along more or less with the exact timeline of history. It even says in the notes that it does alter just slightly for making the story flow a little better, some of the things, but it's basically a historical fiction magical, and I found it wonderfully entertaining and engaging. Now, if you're looking for kind of the wars and actions and lots of happening, it's not that kind of book. I was gonna say it's not necessarily, but it's not that kind of book at all. It is much more in the dialogue, in the characters' heads. You're more like waiting in the war room for the reports to come in and then the discussion of what that means. And it's really fascinating because it's one of those things where it uses magic system, and are the magicians themselves going to be prosecuted, or how are they going to be controlled? And then it kind of gives a nod to, say, political power or slave trade or those kind of things. And it gives it a more friendly way to kind of look at some of these other issues, if that makes sense. So loved it. Number one, when I looked at my list, this book was definitely like the one that I was just blown away, telling everybody about, loved it so much. And that was, I read Labyrinth of the Spirits, Carlos Ruiz Zafon. So this is a Spanish book set in Barcelona. This is actually the fourth and final conclusion of a story that starts with Shadow of the Wind. So if you have not read Shadow of the Wind, this is the one I'm recommending you pick up. There are a lot of people who read this book, and this is the only one they read, and they think it's 5-star and great. And technically, you can do it. This is a story within itself. The second one, Angel's Game, was a 3-star for me. I didn't enjoy it near as much. This was 5-star. But then the third one, Prisoner of Heaven, and the Labyrinth of the Spirit, were both back to 5-star for me. And this one was the pinnacle. It brought back all 3 books. You would revisit the characters, you would revisit the scenes, things were put back together. There is a mystery in Barcelona of a mysterious forgotten library that draws people to it and presents them a book that is in their kind of guardianship or safekeeping. And then that book kind of guides them, becomes alive in some ways, tells them a story or engages their life. And so each of the books kind of deal with that. And this one kind of brings it all together. Like, this is kind of some backstory. This is kind of the overall kind of evil villain kind of situation. These are some of the reasons why some of these things are happening. And I am not normally a girl that likes a lot of fast-paced action, and certainly not a girl that likes a lot of kind of torture, violence kind of situation. And this book, all 4 of these books have that. Particularly I found starting with the second book got a little gruesome and dark. However, it was part of the story. It was part of the reality of what was going on and what was happening, and therefore it was appropriate. It was super good and engaging, and I love the aspect of books and literature and the studies of Barcelona. There are actually maps in these books that are like for real, based on real things, but of course the library itself, it does not exist. It's kind of like the Harry Potter, platform 9 3/4. It is a magical on top of realism, but then a brilliant, brilliant, fun-paced story. So those are my top books of 2023. Did you read any of them? Do you want to read any of them now? What was your top book? Leave me a comment below. I am going to be talking about books that I plan to read in 2024 and talking about how I'm going to be doing TBRs and all those kind of good things coming up in the next week. So I hope you will like and subscribe and stick around. I appreciate it so much. Happy reading, y'all, and Happy New Year.